Don't confuse loud with right. That one sentence didn't just pierce through the tension of the room, it dismantled an entire persona built on volume and bravado. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a reset button on the entire conversation. You could feel it the moment those words left her mouth. Everything changed. The energy, the rhythm, the balance of power in the room. It all shifted in an instant. That sentence, calm yet razor sharp, didn't need to shout. It stood on its own, strong and unmoved. The moment came after an onslaught of interruptions, finger-pointing, and the usual media dramatics. It was supposed to be a clash, a battle of opinions, the kind of TV moment where the loudest voice walks away the winner. But something different happened. In a space where shouting is often mistaken for strength, clarity made its entrance. A simple, composed voice reminded everyone watching that facts don't need a microphone to be heard. They just need the right delivery. What made that sentence so devastating wasn't just what was said, it was how it was said. Calm, controlled, surgical. It wasn't a jab, it was a scalpel. And it cut deep. It cut through layers of performance, past the theatrics, and into the root of the argument. It exposed the entire strategy of drowning substance with noise. When someone tries to bulldoze a conversation with volume, they're betting that the audience won't notice the lack of depth. But this time, the spotlight turned. And what it revealed was an empty performance. There's a power in poise that television rarely celebrates. We're conditioned to respond to heat, to sparks, to conflict. But this wasn't about raising the temperature. It was about controlling the climate. That one sentence didn't shout down an opponent. It made them irrelevant, because once the audience hears it, they can't unhear it. The game changes. Now, everything that follows is filtered through that lens. Every raised voice sounds a little more desperate. Every accusation feels a little more hollow. That sentence becomes the silent referee of the conversation. And the beauty of it lies in its simplicity. No $10 words, no flashy language, just a truth that was so clean, so undeniable, that it didn't need any dressing. It exposed a weakness that's rarely acknowledged on live TV, that some people confuse attention for authority. But in that moment, authority wasn't claimed through spectacle, it was earned through discipline, through restraint, through the kind of composure that says, I don't need to outshout you, I just need to outthink you. You could see the reaction on faces in the room, a subtle recoil, a pause, a flicker of uncertainty. Because when someone is used to dominating a space with force, they don't know what to do when force stops working. They're used to pushing their weight around, throwing out slogans and expecting others to fold. But when that weight meets a wall of calm resistance, when it slides off without making a dent, it becomes clear that bluster has its limits. The audience at home knew it too. You didn't need to be a political junkie to feel the impact. That sentence traveled. It became more than a response, it became a statement. A challenge to the idea that passion always comes with volume, or that noise is a sign of strength. It forced everyone watching to reevaluate what it means to win a debate. It wasn't the person with the most airtime, it was the one who said the least and meant every word. And maybe that's what stung the most. Not the words themselves, but what they revealed. That all the shouting, all the over-talking, all the desperate attempts to steer the narrative, it didn't matter. It couldn't compete with clarity. And once that became obvious, everything else felt smaller. The volume went up, but the authority dropped. Because when someone points out that loud isn't the same as right, the audience starts to listen more carefully. They start to tune out the noise. And what's left is the truth that doesn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't rush. She didn't flinch. While others on that stage threw words like darts, hoping one would stick, she sat steady, measured, deliberate, and precise. With every point she made, she peeled back layers of misinformation like it was second nature. It wasn't just a response, it was an education. Every time the conversation veered into misdirection or shallow political theater, she brought it right back to the core issues, calmly and confidently, like she was holding a compass in a storm. She didn't just disagree, she dismantled, but not with fire, with clarity. the kind of clarity that silences noise without ever raising a voice. She knew the facts cold. Policy numbers, legal standards, historical context, it all came effortlessly. And that was the danger to her opponent. Because when someone tries to win a debate with half-baked points and overconfidence, they're banking on their challenger being just as shallow. That wasn't the case this time, not even close. What made her performance so effective wasn't just the content, it was the composure. While she was being interrupted, spoken over, and prodded into a shouting match, she never took the bait. She didn't need to, because when you're armed with the truth, the facts speak for themselves. And she knew it. That's why she never tried to match energy with energy. She understood the power of contrast. While others were loud and frantic, she was surgical, stripping away misinformation with the kind of precision that forces even the audience at home to lean in. There's a unique kind of tension that builds when someone calmly walks through a weak argument and tears it down, piece by piece. It's not flashy. It doesn't make headlines like a screaming match, but it's more dangerous because it sticks. People remember it. That kind of controlled confidence leaves a lasting impression. It signals something rare in politics. Someone who's not trying to win the moment, but trying to win the truth. And it wasn't just about what she said. It was how she made her opponent look in the process. Every rebuttal exposed how surface level the other points were. Every statistic she cited made the emotional appeals look thin. And every time she stayed calm in the face of provocation, it made the other side seem that much more unhinged. She wasn't there to play the game. She was there to shift the conversation, and she did it without ever raising her voice. That's a hard skill to teach. It requires more than preparation. It requires discipline. In a setting where most people feel the pressure to shout their way to victory, she leaned into substance. When misinformation was lobbed her way, she didn't respond with outrage. She responded with evidence, and not the cherry-picked kind. The kind that's hard to argue with. The kind that cuts through the theatrics and leaves no room for misinterpretation. And you could see it happening in real time. There were moments where her opponent clearly expected a defensive reaction, a stumble, a stutter, something to grab onto, but none came. Instead, she calmly corrected the record. And then, almost effortlessly, elevated the conversation by redirecting it to something more meaningful. That's the sign of someone not just equipped to debate, but to lead. As the segment went on, something shifted. The volume from the other side got louder, the tone more desperate. That's how you know someone's losing ground. They start trying to fill the space with noise. But noise doesn't cover up weak arguments when there's someone at the table who refuses to be rattled. She wasn't there to win a shouting match. She was there to reveal the truth, and she did. And maybe the most impressive part was that she didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate in the moment or push for applause. Because for her, the point wasn't to embarrass or humiliate. It was to clarify, to correct, to calmly take apart false narratives and hold the space for reality to shine through. And that's exactly what happened. With every calm correction, every well-placed fact, and every moment of unshakable poise, she redefined what it means to be prepared. It happened in a split second, but the impact echoed like a drumbeat across the room. That moment when the rebuttal landed, sharp, simple, undeniable, and suddenly the usual rhythm of the conversation stopped. Silence. That rare, uncomfortable pause on live television when someone known for never backing down finds themselves with nothing to say. You could see it play out across the screen. The eyebrows lifted slightly, the mouth parted as if to respond, but no words came. It wasn't just a silence, it was a freeze. A public pause from someone who's rarely caught without a comeback. The reason it hit so hard wasn't just the words themselves, it was everything leading up to them. There had been tension, jabs, attempts to derail, to corner, to dominate the moment with force. But all that energy was met with something colder, calmer, and far more dangerous. Precision. The sentence wasn't flashy or aggressive. It didn't need to be. It carried with it the weight of truth, and when that kind of truth is spoken plainly, it becomes undeniable. It doesn't need to be argued or shouted, it just lands. That pause, That freeze said more than any argument ever could. It was the sound of certainty crumbling, of a carefully rehearsed narrative meeting an unexpected challenge it couldn't brush aside. And it wasn't just visible to those on set. It was felt by everyone watching. That's the thing about live. Moments like that, they're raw, unedited, and impossible to spin. You either have a response or you don't. And in that moment, there was nothing. Just silence and the slowly dawning realization that the script had flipped. What made it so compelling was how rare it is to see. Usually, in debates or on-air arguments, both sides keep the momentum going even if it's just noise. There's a rhythm, a volley, an attempt to outpace the other. But this time, one side had the facts, the calm, and the timing. And the other hit a wall. A wall built not from anger or personal attacks, but from a truth so concise it didn't leave room for evasion. You could watch the body language shift. First, there was the attempt to interrupt, to push back, to retake control. But then, as the words sank in, there was hesitation. Eyes flickered, shoulders pulled back slightly. The confidence that was so present just moments before began to evaporate. And in its place was something unfamiliar, uncertainty. The kind of uncertainty that doesn't just affect a moment, it affects an image. Because someone who builds their persona on always having the upper hand can't afford a moment like that. And yet, there it was. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded with the weight of unspoken acknowledgement, of realizing that the argument had been lost without even a raised voice. That the person across the table wasn't just playing defense, they had taken control, and not by overpowering, but by outsmarting. That moment, frozen in time, became a turning point. It reminded viewers that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes it's just one sentence that stops everything cold. And the ripple effect was immediate. On social media, the clip exploded. People replayed it, quoted it, analyzed it. Not because it was theatrical, but because it was real, authentic. A live, unscripted moment of truth that couldn't be rehearsed or spun away. The internet thrives on moments like these, where one sentence changes the entire dynamic, and this one did exactly that. It wasn't just a win in the context of the conversation. It was a cultural moment. A reminder that even the most forceful voices can be stunned into silence when met with clarity, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say isn't followed by applause or shouting, but by stillness. A stillness that speaks volumes. A stillness that says, "You've been heard, but not believed." That's what that freeze was. It was the visual manifestation of someone realizing their usual tactics had just failed. Live, for everyone to see. The internet doesn't just notice moments like these, it devours them. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. It started as a simple highlight from a live broadcast, but quickly turned into something bigger. People clipped it, reposted it, reacted to it, and turned it into a conversation that spilled across platforms. There was no music, no dramatic edits, just a single clear sentence followed by silence. And somehow that silence said everything. Viewers didn't need context. They didn't need the back and forth leading up to it. That single freeze frame became the moment of impact. It was raw, real, and impossible to ignore. The virality wasn't accidental. It was the result of something rare: authenticity. People are drawn to moments where the truth cuts through, where the performance is stripped away, and what's left is a human reaction that can't be faked. That one sentence did more than just silence the room. It shattered the illusion of control, and audiences picked up on it instantly. The comments were filled with shock, admiration, even disbelief. Did that just happen? She really said that? I've never seen anyone go quiet like that before. Those reactions weren't about political sides. They were about something more universal. The thrill of witnessing a real-time turning point. From Twitter to TikTok, from YouTube to Instagram, the reactions kept growing. Memes were made. Reaction videos flooded timelines. People began sharing the clip not just as a political statement, but as a cultural artifact. It was one of those rare moments where something as simple as a sentence turned into a symbol of calm intelligence overcoming noise, of truth prevailing over ego. And in a media environment that often rewards outrage and drama, this moment stood out precisely because it didn't rely on either. What struck so many people was how quiet the moment was. No yelling, no finger pointing, just a confident statement that stopped everything in its tracks. That kind of composure is magnetic. It invites viewers to look closer, to re-watch, to analyze. People weren't just watching a debate. They were watching a dynamic shift. The freeze, the pause, the sudden lack of response. Those weren't just signs of discomfort. They were proof that something had landed with impact, something that couldn't be talked over or brushed aside. Even people who don't usually tune into political conversations found themselves sharing it. The moment had legs far beyond the news cycle. It became something people quoted in comment threads, something creators reacted to with green screens and split screens, each one adding their own spin, but never taking away from the raw power of the original clip. It was a moment of shared recognition that something powerful had just happened and everyone knew it. Influencers started weighing in. Journalists clipped the exchange and analyzed it in op-eds. Commentators paused their own shows to talk about it. Even those who might not have agreed with the message had to acknowledge the moment. That's how you know it hit, when people who disagree still have to respect the delivery. There's a certain silence that only comes when someone knows they've been outmatched, and the internet thrives on those cracks in the armor. This wasn't just an argument being lost, it was an entire strategy being exposed. And the beauty of it all was how effortless it seemed. The sentence wasn't shouted, it wasn't exaggerated. It was delivered with the kind of confidence that doesn't need to seek attention. It naturally attracts it. That's what caught the audience off guard. So often, people expect these interactions to be one with volume or dramatic flair, but this one proved otherwise. It showed that restraint is powerful, that a well-timed truth, delivered with control, can eclipse any amount of noise. As the clip continued to circulate, its power only grew. Not because it changed minds necessarily, but because it changed tone. It reminded people what a real debate can look like. It challenged the assumption that the loudest voice always wins, and it gave people a moment they could rally around, not just because of what was said, but because of what it revealed. A moment where the usual script was thrown out and reality stepped in. A moment that didn't just trend, it resonated. And when it was all over, what remained wasn't the shouting, the interruptions, or the usual drama that floods so many televised exchanges. What lingered was the weight of a single, undeniable moment, a moment where clarity triumphed over chaos. Where a calm, composed voice didn't just respond, it resonated. That silence, the one that followed a pointed sentence delivered without theatrics, became louder than any argument that had come before it, because in that stillness, a truth was laid bare, and no one could ignore it. This wasn't just about proving a point. It wasn't about one person outshining another on live television. It was about redefining what strength looks like in public discourse. It was about showing that power doesn't always need to roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the whole room still goes quiet. That's what happened here. No grandstanding, no theatrics, just confidence rooted in knowledge, in control, and in truth. And that's why the moment didn't fade. It stayed. The internet did what it always does. It clipped the moment, shared it, amplified it. But this time, the virality wasn't built on spectacle. It was built on substance. People didn't just watch it to be entertained. They watched it because they saw something different, something honest, something that cut through the noise and reminded them that facts, composure, and clear thinking still matter. In a media landscape where outrage is currency, this moment offered something more valuable: authenticity. It's easy to forget, especially in the middle of high-stakes debates and partisan clashes, that audiences are craving more than just noise. They're watching closely. They're listening for something real, and when it shows up, even if just for a moment, they recognize it. That's why this didn't just trend, it echoed. It sparked conversations far beyond politics because it spoke to a deeper hunger for integrity and courage under pressure. And so, as the headlines moved on and the media cycle churned forward, the image of that frozen pause and the voice that caused it remained. Not because it humiliated anyone, but because it exposed something deeper, the unmatched power of calm truth in the face of chaos. It reminded us all that sometimes, the strongest moment in any debate isn't when someone shouts the loudest, but when someone speaks so clearly that no one else knows what to say. In that still, unforgettable moment, something shifted. A reminder was delivered, not just to those in the room, but to everyone watching. Dignity, clarity, and quiet strength are still forces to be reckoned with. And when wielded well, they can change